Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Alice. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Splendid, splendid. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you
Exciting.
so much. And oh, yes, for people that don't know, I am joined today by the great Alice Troughton.
Might let you just trip up on that. Yes, that's Troughton.
Troughton. Splendid. Yes. Um, Now I had the pleasure of watching your newest film, The Lesson, and gotta say, bravo. That film, I
Oh,
loved the film. Oh
oh,
my
thank
days.
you.
It
Oh,
was
brilliant.
really good.
Really
Like
good.
I think I equated it to cooking, right?
Okay.
When you're cooking a meal, right? And you've got your basics there and you have your little taste, and you're like, yeah, that's all right. That's good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And then you'd be like, but let me add a little something else. You add a little something and be like, oh, something else. You're like, oh yeah. And with this film, right, it opens up and it's very compelling. But the more elements that get added, right, the more ingredients that come in, the more intrigue, the more enjoyment you are getting from the piece. And by the end, you're just like, God damn, that was good.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad that they went down like that.
Oh yeah, it was splendid. It always intrigues me with things like this. Like, how did this come together? Like, how did the story come to you?
It came via Cami Gatta, who is my producer on it, one of my three very brilliant producers. And she found me and she had found the story, and she's French. And I said, she's French, she's sitting opposite. Sorry, she's French.
I mean, can
But,
she
but
change that?
what
Like, you know what I
Cammy,
mean?
yeah, what she loved and actually what really drew her to it was the sheer kind of dissection of the class system, the British class
Mm.
system that's within the film. That really appealed to her. And in fact, as we financed and we went to Europe and we went to America, that was what really fascinated people, because it is a kind of like a little peephole into the houses of the rich, the famous, and the kind of death by 1,000 cuts that the British class system can deal effortlessly. It's still in our great, it's still here. Whether I don't care what everybody says, the class
Oh,
system is here.
yeah.
I mean, obviously we go on top of that with um uh any kind of discrimination that we have, and every country has discrimination, but I think the British really have taken dinner party savagery to the kind of a peak, if you know what I mean. And so there's a lot of the class system and Liam is an outsider, and he is a different class to the household who he goes into to tutor, and that is part of the storytelling, and it's certainly part of Liam's motivations through the film as well. It's one aspect of it, but it is one of the important aspects of it, and we really wanted to highlight that. I had just done some amazing television with Russell T Davies. I did a script called Cucumber.
Mm, mm.
For about 10 years we've been told to, they've wanted television to look cinematic. It's one of the pitch words in movies: we want cinematic high-end television. So I've been doing that kind of high level of budget and playing with the toys, and so we felt that it was the time to, if it also felt like a real privilege to have the possibility to do a movie, and that we need the representation. So for all of those reasons, Camille and I committed to do it together. And as with all independent films, or well, I mean, we're not an independent film. We are distributed by Universal, hence my actors are on strike. But we're a low budget film. I mean, we are a small budget film, and so it took its time to get made. It takes devotion, it takes dedication, and it takes the right kind of whoosh. It's a bit like, actually, it is like childbirth. It is, you get, when it goes really, really quickly, and you suddenly have to shoot it. We had like 22 days to shoot it in after
Okay.
a 5-year development process. So yeah.
Ah, what was the biggest challenge for you with this, other than, the things like financing and, you know, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
I mean, finance, obviously, I think for all independent filmmakers, and is the big challenge.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, our industry is not in a healthy state at the moment. And so there are some amazing heads of industry that are pushing new schemes through and encouraging people to come up. And there is a actual really great wave of female directors coming up, but we're very far away from gender parity at the moment. So it felt really important to do it, and it felt like a privilege to do it. But the most difficult thing was actually getting it off the ground. Once we were filming, it was beautifully light and joyous. And I know it isn't a film that actually you've got it's called a sunlit noir, so there are grim things going on under the sun, but actually the sense of play that I had with my DP Anna Paterakina was creatively just very fulfilling for me, and the actual shoot was the easiest thing about the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, there was some really great shots in this. Just like the color tone, the shots, the script.
That's Anna, I have to say. Anna is the most extraordinary filmmaker, and she's Russian, and she trained at Malmo in Sweden. And so we ended up watching a lot of Tarkovsky. In fact, the house at the beginning of Solaris is very, very simple. I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why me and Anna went for the location. But let me be clear about it. Anna picked the house, and she picked the house, and I was entirely confident in letting her make that choice, because I wanted, because it was all one location. He needed to be out, and we didn't want to light it. We didn't want it to feel lit. You know, we didn't want it to feel kind of, didn't want to draw attention to the production values of it, really. It needed, even the amazing set design that's behind there with all of those original new work, it's subliminal in your world, as it should be, because it's kind of Liam's point of view. So Anna had the final say about which location we went to, because it was so important that it needed to work for her to like naturally, in the way that she writes really beautifully. And she's a very simple, in fact, as I get as I have gotten more experience as a director and I've become confident and kind of clear about how I like to direct, simplicity is one of the real go-tos for me. If I'm trying to overcomplicate it, there's a reason that there's something wrong about why I'm overcomplicating it. And Anna Light's in the same way. You know, it's a kind of, it's experience and a point of pride that we like things to be very simple. And we also like a joyous set. We like to have a laugh. And that's also really important. And I think that those things subliminally show underneath the film, which was just a really, really satisfying creative process for all of us involved, I think I can say, actually.
Yeah, well, I think a film like this, it can't be shiny, right? It can't be, one of those illuminated, like kind of
feel to it, doesn't she? She does
yeah.
something. I tell you what, there is something really complicated. You should get Anna on. She did something that was really scary. She did a sensor limiting, because we wanted to shoot on 60mm, and there's no way we couldn't do it. We couldn't process it. We were in Hamburg. We didn't have access to film processing. I was a big fan of Joanna Hogg and the kind of style that she had in her films, and a lot of films have been shooting, and I shot like all of Merlin on film. We were on 35mm for like 5 series, so it's not like, oh no, I'm a movie director, I must shoot on film. It's more that it leaves a taste in the back of your mouth that I think I couldn't quite describe. And I said this to Anna, I can talk emotionally, because I'm not a DP. I can talk emotionally about the feelings that I felt and what we wanted to do. So Anna actually restricted the sensor on the Alexa. It was Alexa, wasn't it, Cam? Yeah, on the Alexa that we were using. So we shot with a restricted sensor, which in a sense gives you that kind of restriction of image. And then she went to a company called Dirty Looks, who are one of the best graders, and worked with them really carefully on getting the look. So whereas I'm all like, oh yeah, she just managed to do it, she put a lot of thought into how we could recreate that feeling for it, because you don't get sunlit. You do get sunlit noirs. We wanted it to be a sunlit noir. And it was, but how do you just keep that feeling that there's something lurking under the bed sheets all the way through it? And I think that the kind of subliminal feeling of it. And then on top of it, she gave me the freedom to do, well, I say gave, I didn't wrestle the camera away from her. In any moments that I'm kind of, shooting is stressful and you need to be onto it, you need to be thinking about what you want, but you also need to be present so that you can react to what's happening right in front of you. My times to process would be when I would take a sandwich down at lunchtime, go and sit at the lake, and I would watch the koipu, who are the giant rats of enormous size, and they were very happy and having a little family and I would watch the dragonflies, and then Anna this is how wonderful collaborator she is. She was like, let's shoot them. And then when we were in the edit, my amazing editor Paolo, there's this thing that, and then listen, I'm not saying I am Miyazaki, but he talks about this moment of Ma. And Ma is the Japanese word for emptiness. And he thinks it's really important to create spaces within tense dramas of lost, where he calls it, where, I'm paraphrasing him terribly, but it's where one hand claps and opens, and it's the space between the clap.
Yes. Yeah.
And so those moments, the robot lawnmower, which I was always obsessed with anyhow, because it's such a class status, and the wildlife and the nature around the lake, those went into the film to build in those moments. Now, listen, this is all, it might not have been successful, it might have been or whatever, but this was the theory behind it. And, I love playing with. Thank you.
No, it works really well, because I think a film like this, if it's boom, 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 you don't get the same feel. So those moments of quiet create that unease, because there's more to everything. Because especially at the beginning, when we first meet Richard, oh God, I forget his character's name.
Sinclair. So Richard Sinclair, and Daryl is Liam.
Yes, when we first meet him, it's like he's very just like and but there's something sinister there, just kind of lurking.
How does he do it? Isn't he the most amazing actor? Because you're right, it's all convivial, but then he kicks his son. And Leon notices at the dinner table, he does that kind of brutal psychological kicking, that subtle undermining and toxicity. Funnily enough, I've had quite a lot of people say to me about the father-son relationship in it, and how they empathize with how it strikes chords. That's sort of overtly ambitious for your son father, and the kind of toxicity and the chasm between them because of that ruthless ambition and sort of level of standard and level of criticism. A lot of boarding school culture here, and Bertie, the son of the household, is from the boarding school culture. And that whole class thing of the Oxbridge exam that he's being trained for, this is part of the this is where you must get to, and that pressure is insurmountable. I think it can really drive people to despair and breakdowns. Certainly there's a huge group, anybody that wants to read into it, boarding school survivors, there's a support group for people who have come out of boarding school. You need to know. But so I will make another movie about boarding schools at some point. It's the quintessential things in British culture that we accept, that the French go, do you really hate your children? Why do you send them away for why do you but yes, we actually do really love our dogs more than we love our children.
Well, I think all of that plays really well into it, because what I think I said, like, when you first meet the characters, everyone, they're all a bit shit. They're all a bit assholes, right? But as those layers come off, you understand why, right? You understand what these defense mechanisms are, why they're in place. When Liam first meets Bertie, it's very standoffish. But I think the more Bertie understands Liam, and the fact that Liam is just helping, right, where he's used to being told what to do, right?
Yes, I know, I can say
it. I don't speak well, Alice. You do. But it's like he's used to that kind of interaction from his dad. So I think he's expecting it from Liam. But
he's awful, isn't he? He's awful, he's awful to Liam.
And we see him open up as the film
that expression,
goes
you
on.
kick the cat. It's like everybody kicks somebody that's underneath them. That's the way that the kind of it's an amazing Monty Python sketch.
Yes.
I look down on him and he looks down on me, and again, British class system. I challenge you to find it or English classes. I mean, you know, challenge you to find that same kind of intrinsic into our social structure, rules, lines, positions, things that you shouldn't put your head above the, you know, you shouldn't jump above your class, you shouldn't get out of your station, you shouldn't, you know, that kind of stay where you are and do the best you can and feed the rich sort of thing. get my Ken Loach coming out now, come on.
Well, I think yeah, no, that's so evident in the film, the way it's crafted and brought to life, and you definitely see it towards the end, you know, with the whole book situation and all of that. But one thing that is so intriguing here, because I know in the production notes we get sent, you talk about wanting to look at the female gaze in this sort of film, but what's really interesting is Helene's the Helene character, because at the beginning you think, right, it's the dudes, but then when Helene steps up, it's one of, you know, it's like in Star Wars when everyone thinks it's Darth Vader and then you realize it's the Emperor's been pulling the strings, and you see Helene and you'd be like, yo, she's playing a different level of chess right now.
That puppet analogy is absolutely right. It is, and it was part of the joy. It was part of the joy of doing the movie was, you know, so we start off with those kind of quite established noir roles, and you because Hélène is an object of desire, you know, when you see her from Liam's point of view, that's very traditional noir. Yes. You know, that's very traditional noir gaze, and she is the femme fatale, enigmatic, drifting, you know, actually verbally is quite non-verbal compared to the male characters on the screen. And you think that this is a
softly spoken.
Softly spoken, sexual, objectified. And so there's hints in the film, and I think it is a film that benefits from second viewing once you've got to the end, because then you can start to enjoy the sort of subtle signifiers that are around it. And two of the signifiers, I can say this, aren't I? This is kind of spoilery kind of chat. But there's a point in the second time that Liam is watching Sinclair and Hélène in the studio, in the study opposite him, the second time that he's watching them, and he is observing and she is observed, and then she turns and she looks at him.
Oh, yeah.
And she breaks the gaze. She breaks the male gaze. Now that's she breaks the male gaze. But it is one of those kind of small signifiers when you know the end of it, that you actually realize that Hélène isn't going to be objectified. She isn't going to be trapped within that role. Julie Delpy, in previous interviews, now she's on strike, incredible. So she can't talk for herself. But what she and I talked about in the process was that she is a maman fatale. She's the mother fatale, not a femme. She's a young girl. In fact, Julie was saying that that's been really misinterpreted because, you know, femme means a different thing in French. It's not just young girl, is it? It's that. Anyhow, she wants to call it maman fatale, the older woman in the same position who you don't know which way they're going to go. And if you know women in their 50s, you might understand that. We're angry and we're out there and we have some power.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, because I love Julie Delpy. I think she's an incredible. The Before films are some of my favorite films of all time. I love those films so much. And in Before Midnight, right? She's the older woman, but it's still controlling the femininity of the character. It's still there. She's still this strong character, this sexual character, this intelligent character. It's not diminished because of the age of the character. And I think in that, like that moment, especially when, you know, she looks at him, it's like she's now taken the power from that situation. And it was just, you just watch it and that because at first you're like, Liam, you little freaking perv.
You little pervert. And he's like, and then the next time he went, I mean, you know, she reclaims the center stage. I mean, I think we can say that without spoilers, is that she reclaims her place on the central stage and as the center of the film. And then that is something that from the periphery, from having sublimated her creativity to support Sinclair. There's a lot of what has gone before, which we talked about, but we know that Ellen is an artist in her own right that's given that up to become a curator. So she's gone from a creative field into a more mechanical field. So she now actually leeches off other people's creativity rather than is her own creativity, all supportive of other people. Supportive, let's say, not leeches, because she's not kind of toxic in that way. But in the same way that she has spent her life supporting Sinclair and supporting other artists, she sublimated her own creativity. Now, that could have stayed as the status quo.
Yes.
That could have stayed as the status quo. But then the Felix incident happened and the grief within their family started. And I think that was the thing that tips her over the balance and decides her, the character with its overall arc sets the motions of our film in order. There's a scene where Richard is watching a movie in the lesson, and he's watching it with Liam, with the character of Liam, Sinclair Liam, and the film that's on is a Diana Dors, very old, The Blonde Sinner. And it's a really old classic noir, and there are some spoilers in that noir that goes on the screen, so you might have to go and watch it now and get what's going on.
Well, it is all in the detail, I found, right? Because I think there's an interaction between Liam and Bertie towards the beginning of the film, and Bertie says something which seems very kind of off the cuff, doesn't seem important. But then I think it's in the last part of the film that you really go, oh, right. And there seems to be a lot of that in the like.
Well, Alex is a really clever writer, and he's, we spent a long time of, exposition in movies is always really key, setting the thing up. Alex is a stand-up comic, hilarious. And so a lot of the kind of cut and thrust savagery behind the dialogue and comes from his innate sense of actually really great comedy. And yet he was putting this thriller on top of it. And then you put Daryl and Richard in, both of whom have tremendous comedy chops, but also great kind of serious drama chops. And the balance of that with that writing, I think, brings you to that kind of level of, you laugh. I mean, you laugh, yes. And you laugh despite yourself.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh my God, but I'm still in the thriller. I shouldn't be making it. So, and I love that. I really enjoy that kind of. Yeah.
But it's sensible humor as well.
Yeah.
Because a thing that does frustrate me sometimes, you're watching a film and there feels like these false jokes in there.
That'll be the executives saying, could we put some jokes into this stuff?
But because I just remember, because I was not a big fan of like superhero films.
No,
like
not
some
your
of but then I watched Blade.
Okay, you should really good actually. A few years back now, isn't it? It was Wesley Snipes.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Oh, it's so good. But there was humor in it.
Yeah.
Right. And there were these funny moments, but it's still a dark film. And
we were just talking about Yorgos Lanthimos, again, who's one of my all-time favorites.
So good.
So good. And again, you laugh in his films, or Unsettled,
Yeah.
I don't know if I put the Billy Wilder quote in, if you've read this book, forgive me if you do, but obviously Billy Wilder directed some of the kind of like all-time, classic noirs, and he would say, but he was also funny. He was also, he had huge comedies as well, and he would combine the two. And he said that he was very, very keen not to be pigeonholed as a director. And if he wanted to do one and the other and the other and one, he would, because people who liked it would come to it, whatever happened. The people who could recognize, style and quality would come and watch his films, whatever. And I think that we undervalue audiences all the time. We kind of spoon feed them, and you don't need to do that.
Well, also, think of life, right? How many times have we been in a weird situation and then you say something stupid off the cuff and it's like and people still chuckle, but then it's like, no, but you said, and you get back to, what I mean? But that's how things move. It's not always just serious. You can throw your humor in, like that's
it. And I was just lucky enough that with those performers. And it can fail if you kind of can't. If people are going, "What is my tone? I need to," But with those performers, they are so clever and so skilled that they could manage it.
Yes. Alice,
Oh,
we're coming to a
never
close.
know.
This is it. It feels like I haven't talked to you like it's 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
On forever, can we? I
oh
know.
my
Have you
day.
got everything you want? Is there any? I should say to you that the film comes out on the 22nd of September. All good cinemas. Have you got everything that you need?
Oh, I mean, yeah, as I said, we could talk for like this is super compelling. I feel, I know a load of studios are pushing their films back because the cast aren't around. But I will say a lot of the times in cast interviews, they're not long enough to actually get any really interesting
But I'm
things.
sad because they're so interesting. We
Mm,
did a tranche of interviews before Tribeca because we opened at Tribeca, and Richard and Shilly and Daryl all did their interviews, and they're so fascinating about the code. It is a shame that but that they can't publicize the film. But we all feel very passionately in support of SAG-AFTRA and the WGA about the strike.
yeah.
And yeah, if you've got them, and there will be a few films like The Lesson that will suffer from it. I'm not going
Mm.
to, but
But
suffer
this
is the wrong word. If we get
conversation,
a resolution, if we get a future for our film industry, the statistic about people not making minimum health insurance in America
it's
is
silly.
just terrible.
It's
And so
ridiculous.
I suppose me and the producers all very, very much hope that these strikes help to create a fairer and a more rounded and a buoyant film industry in the future that will support all of these brilliant female directors that are coming up out of the festivals, that will be the next generation of talent within a fair recompense, within a fair system. And we all
Mm,
I very much hope that
yeah.
happens.
This conversation I feel it's done wonders, and you've been fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Like
Really lovely to talk to you,
the
Kevin.
film was tremendous, and I think people will be so just gripped by it. So congratulations on such a fantastic job. And Alice, please come by the podcast again, because I feel
Ask
we
me
can have some
anytime.
great conversations.
Ask me anytime, Kevin. It was a joy my end as well. Thank you so much.
Splendid. You have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you,
Take care.
Kevin.
Thanks a lot. Really
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
that.
Cheers now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.